Hello! Today we are going to do some flying in the Cessna, the C172. This is the version of the Cessna with the steam dials, so the old-fashioned instruments, just because I think it's a bit more fun than looking at a glass screen. And we are going to fly from Booker Airfield in Buckinghamshire in the UK. We're going to fly via several VOR stations and land at Southend. And we'll have a look at the different methods of navigation along the way, but it should be good fun. Okay, so first things first, we need to get this aeroplane up and running. So we're just going to go and check the control throws before we do anything. So we can see we can move the ailerons, we can move the elevators, we can move the rudders. We have control of the mixture over there, and we have control of the throttle, which is all good. And if we can remove the yoke, we can see all the switches down here, so we can get the airplane started up. So I'm just looking at the switches down here. That's a bit odd. Okay, yeah, that is off. I was just making sure that things are in the right positions to begin with. Just out of interest, do any of these switches operate anything here? No, they don't. I'm just testing switches on my controller. Parking brake does work on my controller though. Okay, so we'll leave parking brake on for engine start. Might be worth having a quick look around the aircraft while we're here. The Cessna C172 high wing. The fuel is in the wings in the 172, so you don't have to choose a tank. It's gravity fed down into the engine. You can see small slots in the leading edge of the wing. That's the stall warning device. So it's like almost a musical instrument that's at an angle. So obviously once the airflow comes in at the right angle, it plays a tune or makes a screechy noise, which we all know as the stall warning. Obviously you've got the landing lights, which we're probably not going to need today because it's a nice sunny day in the world. Yeah, the Cessna is it's probably one of the most common general aviation airplanes in the world, isn't it? So you can see there's the fuel filler taps on top. But yeah, otherwise, let's get going. So, okay, so we turn on the master switches. And we put the mixture in to rich. Looking at the fuel tanks, we don't have to select left or right, it's just a central fuel tank. There is a fuel valve down here though that we have to push in, otherwise it won't do anything. Okay, we have an engine, and you can see now the engine is operating. It's providing the power and pressure for the gauges to come to life. So the artificial horizon or attitude indicator has leveled up. So let's have a quick look at the gauges, see what we've got. We've got indicated airspeed, so that measures the airflow through the pitot tube over in the wing over there. You've got the attitude indicator, which tells you which way is up and down. We've got the altimeter. So the way to read the altimeter, the small needle or the small marker on the end of the thin needle is tens of thousands of feet. The short needle is thousands of feet. The long needle is hundreds of feet. And you will notice there are two other readings either side of it. So those are your barometric pressure. If I press B, you'll see it change and my indicated altitude has changed. So I'm not going to go over it completely today, but you can turn this knob to tune the altimeter. There's a shortcut in Flight Simulator. Press B, and the reason for that is the air pressure. So the altimeter measures your altitude above sea level by the air pressure, and obviously air pressure changes with the weather. So you need to get a reading from your current location, which would obviously be the airport typically, to get what they call a METAR information, meteorological information. Okay, so you have the Nav Instruments, Nav 1, Nav 2. We've got turn coordinator, which tells you if your airplane is flying along its axis or not, or if it's skidding sideways through the air. Obviously that counts when you're turning to do a coordinated turn where the tail is following the nose around the turn. But it's also important for if you're flying in a straight line in a crosswind, it will indicate the crosswind because you're skidding sideways. The compass, again, there's a heading marker on the compass, so we're going to spin that round just briefly. Oops, it's something that's really frustrating about Flight Simulator following an update a while ago. It used to be you could roll these instruments around really quickly, and you can't anymore. It takes ages and ages to spin them round. So we're going to go for about 225, I think, is the takeoff direction. We'll find out in a moment. So this is the heading bug the autopilot will follow. We're just getting it ready for takeoff because I know which direction the runway is here. It's just going to be 24, I think, not 245, not 225. You can tune the compass. I'm not going to touch it. The reason for that is you get magnetic deviation around the world. So magnetic north, which a compass obviously shows you, varies around the world. Vertical speed indicator, so that's in hundreds of feet or tens of feet a minute. So no, hundreds of feet a minute on this gauge. So that'd be 500 feet a minute, 1,000 feet a minute, and so on and so forth. What else have we got? We've got ADF down here, which is hardly ever used anymore because the ADF stations have almost all been decommissioned. We've got obviously RPM, so we're looking good at 1,000 revs. So if I just pull that back a little bit, so I'm just configuring my throttle here. There we go. So you can see tick over will go incredibly low. We're at risk of the engine dying, so you're looking for about 1,000 revs. Over here we've got the fuel quantity. We've got lots of fuel, fuel flow, exhaust gas temperature. You've also got oil, and you're looking at the pressure there as well. So as you increase the throttle, you're looking for the needle to rise into the green, which is great. And then you've obviously got the electric generation that's happening from the engine. Okay, so we can go and turn on the beacon lights, nav lights and strobe lights, turn on the pitot heat. We can turn on the avionics systems in the aircraft, which is switched on these two radios. It's a bit odd that in the stock sim these are on by default. Normally you go and switch them off when you're getting out of the aeroplane, but you know, there's a power on each thing. I wonder if we can actually get away with turning this off, because we want to navigate without seeing a map. So let's see if it will let us. Yes, it will. That's really handy. So we're going to turn the radios completely off today, because we're not going to use them. Oh, actually we can't get away with it, can we? Because we need to tune in the nav radio. Oh, that's a shame. Okay. So what we will do instead then is, if we leave the flight plan screen up, we can't see the map, so we can't cheat. Does that make sense? This is the autopilot. It's the master control panel for the autopilot. So you've got obviously the autopilot on off button. You've got heading mode, nav mode, approach mode, back course mode, which very few airfields have got back course available, but it's there. Back course basically means you can use the reverse of the ILS. So if one runway's got an ILS but you can't do the opposite, it flips it over in the mind of the autopilot, so you can actually fly backwards against the ILS into the opposite end of the runway that has the ILS. And then you've got up and down, which obviously is to set your vertical speed when you're on autopilot. So when you're in, if you press Alt, the Alt button repeatedly, it goes to vertical speed mode, and then you can use up and down. This is for the ADF, we're not going to use it. Or is it the transponder? Let's have a look. No, it's the transponder, sorry, am I talking about? Talking rubbish. Other than that, the 172 is quite straightforward, really. Something that a lot of people don't pay much attention to is this little panel here, which provides you the sounds you sometimes hear of the markers. So you can see at the moment it's lit up with the markers beacon. So when you hear the beeping when you're flying over the runways or flying towards an airfield. That's the markers you're hearing. Yeah, if we put the Nav 1 on as well, you would hear tones to do with the Nav radio being tuned in and picking up a frequency. So you can hear a Morse code when you're tuned into a VOR. So if we go and look, we're going to take off from Booker and fly out towards the Bovingdon VOR. If we go and search for information on Bovingdon, you can see there's a Morse code sequence. So we'll try that en route. We'll go and play with switching on the Nav 1 or the Nav 2, depending on which radio we're using at the time, to listen to the Morse code sequence. The other thing we can do is in here we will switch the, if you push the button on the receiver, it switches the focus between tuning a comm radio and tuning the nav radios, which we have just done. There's also something else worth pointing out down here. There's this CDI button, switches between GPS mode and VLOC mode. So GPS mode means these instruments would reflect our position relative to a programmed flight plan following a GPS route. If we press CDI, which stands for course deviation indicator, that's what this is. It's a course deviation indicator. If we switch that to VLOC mode, it's going to show our position for VORs and localizers, which is obviously what that stands for. Okay, so you can see no matter which one we click on these, they both say the same as each other because these two units are wired together. Okay, so we're in VLOC mode, so these radios are going to reflect the VOR tuning data. Okay, so we come off the throttle, off the parking brake. We're just going to try and turn extremely tightly and avoid this guy. Try not to chop him to pieces. Let's look out over the nose. So it's only a 60-mile trip, it's not going to take very long at all, but it's really just to illustrate the radio use. So on the taxi out to the runway, we're going to go for the first level of flaps, which if I sit down you can see we have dropped the flaps. So the flaps is actually a switch over here. There's one alongside it. So if we move it down, you can see that happening. So one is a flap lever, the other shows the actual flap's position. Okay, let's just slow down a little bit to make it around this corner. So runway 24 at Booker. Right, let's go and have a look at a little nav map. So wind is 10 knots side wind. So it's just about doable in the Cessna. So we're going to take off and then turn 180 degrees and tune the nav radio into 113.75. We could do that before we take off, to be honest. So let's go and look down here. We want 113.75. So the outer dial is going to tune the integers. The inner dial is going to tune the decimals. 113.75. 113.75. So at the moment this is the standby frequency. You only ever edit the standby frequency. This instrument is actually showing the active frequency, which is the top one. So we can flick them. Yeah. And that does that for us. Okay. Let's get going, shall we? So we'll press F on the keyboard to center our view, we'll press space, and we go full throttle. The engine torque is pulling us slightly to the left, so we counter that with a bit of right rudder. Start to rotate, and you can see the wind getting underneath the wing there. And the wind is now pushing the tail to the right, the nose is going left. So we climb out, Wait for the airspeed to come up to about 80 knots, then we can raise the flaps. Okay, so we can look from outside. So you can see us crabbing slightly to hold the same direction that we took off. It's not a major problem. So we need to see the instruments. Okay, so at this point we can see the nav radio has come alive. And we know we want to be flying the 55 degree track towards BNN, or the one at 113.75. So you will notice on the nav radio there's an OBS knob, so we will turn this to 55 degrees on the compass rose around its outside. So what this is basically saying, we want to know what direction we need to be going. So it's saying, yeah, if we wanted to fly directly at the beacon from where we are at the moment, 55 degrees, which makes, you know, it's absolutely obvious because we are in line with that track on the ground. But if we turn, you will notice the needle is moving. So we're coming around towards 55 degrees on the compass. Well, and we'll explain what that means in a moment. So we just come up through 2,000 feet. We're only going to fly at 2,000 feet all day. It's 40 degrees. Can I pull the throttle back? 50 degrees. So we're 55 degrees. I'm going to hit the autopilot button. So it's gone roll and vertical speed. So we'll go for altitude hold mode. And we'll go for... we need to spin the heading round, don't we? We'll go for nav mode actually. So what's going to happen is the aeroplane at the moment is indicating here that we are to the left of the 55 degree track towards the VOR station tuned in at 113.75, and that's exactly what we can see here. There's the 55 degree track, we are to the left of it. So what the autopilot is doing in nav mode is getting us back on to that 55 degree track. So we've selected 55 on the Omni bearing selector, and this is illustrating that we are to the left of the 55 degree track and we are heading towards the VOR. You can see it's coming in because the plane is not flying 55 degrees, it's flying about 100 degrees, which you can see here. So regardless of crosswinds, which are actually quite strong today, look, the plane is actually taking care of that. So it's intercepting that 55 degree track. This is one of the nice things about the 172 is it has an autopilot, so we were able to put it into altitude hold mode. We can even go and correct that down to 2,000 feet if we want. So we can say, yeah, we're going to 2,000 feet and we want to come down at 500 feet a minute to get there, and you will see now the vertical speed has dropped to 500 feet a minute and the altitude is dropping, and the plane will level out and go back to altitude hold mode when it gets to 2,000 feet. Okay, so you can see at the same time we are now on the 55 degree line, so the needle has moved to the middle and the plane is turning itself, but obviously we're dealing with a crosswind. So the plane is dealing with that for us. We can actually see that. Look at the turn coordinator. Can you see it's bobbling to one side? It has, yeah, it hasn't stabilized yet. It's still stabilizing. But if you look and see what's going on, the plane's actually pointing across the wind. So you're going to see the turn coordinator to the right hand side quite a lot. There it goes, look, it keeps moving. And the plane's actually fighting against. The wind's quite variable. You can see that happening, look. So we're actually going kind of that way, but we're pointing that way. So the plane is crabbing into the wind to hold the 55-degree line. Well, the simulator's paused, great. Let's see if it unpauses itself. Give it a few seconds. I do hope they fix this in an update soon. It pauses all the time. Probably once or twice in every flight I get pauses. There we go, it's released itself. So yeah, so we're travelling the 55-degree line. We're pointing 65 degrees, so we're 10 degrees off track. Yeah, and you can actually see it quite easily on this map. So we know the second nav is that we're going to fly to is 117.50, but I think it's actually quite useful to fly over the top of this VOR station. So to avoid the aeroplane flying around in circles, what we're going to do is go to heading mode. So before we get to the VOR, I'm going to turn this round and switch the autopilot into heading mode. Hopefully it gets there before we get to the VOR. It's so frustrating that you can't change headings quickly. Okay, so then we go to heading mode. So the autopilot is no longer following the nav radio, it's following the heading marker. And we're at 2,000 feet and just trundling along. This is live weather, by the way. I typically always use live weather, so we get to see the real situation going on. So the reason for going to heading mode is I want to see the nav radio switch from to from. Yeah, so at the moment flying a 55-degree track to the radio at 113.75 to the beacon, it knows we're travelling to it. When we pass over the top of it, this will go blank for a moment and then it will switch to from. So it will know if you're travelling 55 degrees, you're from the beacon. So that really illustrates you can navigate to or from beacons on what we call radials. So you can see if we follow and measure from here, you can see there's a distance, a magnetic radial angle and a distance. So that would be the 55-degree line. Yeah, but you could choose any line. So once you're going from a given beacon, you could say I want to fly the 70-degree line, for example, from the beacon. So we'll try that. So once we get over the top of it, or once we've flown over it, we'll change to 70 degrees. Oh, actually, not 70, let's go for 85 degrees. So remove that distance measurement. We'll use this. So rather than tuning to the next VOR station, we'll go for the 85-degree radial from BNN. So we'll change the OBS, remembering we're in heading mode at the moment. We'll change this to 85. 70, 80, 5 degrees. So the 85-degree radial. So this will suddenly sweep across. And it will say from anytime soon. Get ready. There goes the needle sweeping across because we're going straight past the beacon. And it's gone to from. Okay, does that make sense? So you will now see if we go to nav mode on the autopilot, the plane will turn right, because at the moment we are to the right of the line we wanted to be on. Sorry, the line is to the right of us. So it's going to chase that line to get it back into the middle. Yeah? So it's intercepting it. It's flying quite a very, very steep interception course. And now it will start turning left again. And it's trying to get this needle into the middle. When the needle is in the middle, we are on the 85-degree line. If the needle is to the right, we are to the left of the line. If the needle is to the left, we are to the right of the line. So you can see that happening. Look, we're getting onto the line. And obviously because of this 30-knot crosswind, the plane's having to figure out how to crab to do it. So it's going to be wallowing around a little way as it kind of evens itself up. You can see now we're flying that direction and pointing that direction. It's quite cool. Obviously at altitude here, okay, we're only at a couple of thousand feet, but you can see down on the ground it was only a 10 knot wind because of the trees and things like that, but obviously at altitude it was 30 knots, so I'm hoping when we come to land at our destination we won't have the same problem again. Okay, so we're following the 85 degree track from BNN 113.75. While we're doing this, we could look for another beacon. So we'll use Heathrow, 113.60. So if we didn't have any form of GPS, this is a luxury, us being able to look at little nav map. 113.60. If we tune that into the second nav radio down here, so 113. Oops, I need to change this over. 113.60. So this is the nav 2 radio, and we can spin this round and say, well, what direction is it from the beacon to us? And it's about 8 degrees. So if we were to measure from that beacon an 8 degree line, oh look, there we are, exactly on the 8 degree line. So you can use both radios. In this case we're using one VOR station to fly from, and we're using another one to figure out on the map where we are. Yeah? So in that case we didn't take any notice of the OBS reading in terms of our direction. We used it to find out the bearing from the beacon to us. So if we do it again, because we're travelling across it, it's going to happen quite quickly. So by the time I draw it, it's going to be about 12 degrees. So let's try that again. Measure the distance, and yeah, when we did it we were there. So you can see exactly how that works. So you can figure out by triangulating using VOR radios where you are on the map. So we're heading towards these have acronyms, they also have names. So Brookman's Park, BPK, Bravo Papa Kilo. So we can switch over nav 1 to say fly to BPK 117.50. So we'll go to heading mode. We need to change the heading. If we don't change the heading mode, when we retune the nav radio, the plane will start changing direction. So we've gone to heading mode, it's shown here. We're following the direction the plane was already going. Now we're going to change the frequency to 117.50. So 117.50, and we make that the active frequency, and this is now woken up. It knows we're travelling towards it. We can turn the omni bearing selector, and so we wanted to be travelling 85 degrees to the beacon. So there's 60, 70, 85 degrees to the beacon. If we spin the OBS compass round, 2 will turn into from. Yeah? So we can now go back to nav mode, and the plane is going to carry on, and we're not seeing any real difference because we were already on the 85 degree track. But once we leave BPK, what we can say, once it becomes a from reading on the nav 1 instrument, we can just change the OBS to 123 degrees, and we'll be leaving on 123. So we'll wait until we fly over the top, and we'll spin the OBS round to 123 degrees, and remembering that the autopilot is following the nav radio, it will then turn right, and it will turn beyond 123 because we will have overshot and gone over here. So it will turn right and come back and rejoin that track. So the reason that navigating by VOR is so important, that you follow a particular track through the sky, isn't really so obvious unless you're near a big airport that has corridors through the sky that aeroplanes are following for standard instrument approaches or departures, where they are following kind of an invisible track, a roadway through the sky, and you need to avoid it, or you need to stay within it if you're flying a standard instrument departure or approach route. So that's where this kind of technology came about and why it's so useful. And the other reason is in poor visibility. It's going to get you from A to B easily without GPS. Obviously GPS has taken over, but this is an interesting academic pursuit, and your GPS may fail. So we were going to play again with the radios, weren't we? So let's have a look at the BPK, show information for that one. So it's just dash ... So let's go turn it on and turn the volume up. Will it let us turn the volume up? Oh, that's interesting. It's not going to let us. Oh, that's a shame. It's not simulated by the look of it. I thought it was. Unless I'm missing something horrendous here. Ah, volume was working then. Oh, maybe it was on max volume. I was expecting to hear the Morse code sequence though. To hear this. And it's not doing it. I wonder why. Okay, so we're coming towards the beacon, look, and we're now flying from, and we need to go to the 123 degree track, as we talked about. So if we go back to nav radio, notice this went to roll mode when we went over the top of the nav beacon. It automatically does that. So if we go back to nav mode now, the plane is going to turn right, and if we look, we have overshot just like we said, but to follow the 123 degree track it's going to have to go to a steeper angle. So watch the compass, look, it's turned straight past 123 degrees. It's gone to 170 degrees to fly straight down towards this line, and then it will probably overshoot because it's not great at dealing with crosswinds and predicting. But it may do well at it, we'll see. So now it's coming back round slowly. Obviously it's probably going to be 10 degrees more to deal with the crosswind, so it'll probably be 135-ish, because you can still see, look, we're being pushed. At the moment it's not very apparent because we're flying into the wind, but as we turn across the wind, which was obviously very severe on this leg, we were crabbing at a very high angle. So yeah, it's about 132 it's going for, look, at the moment. It's coming slowly round. So because we're flying against the wind and not across the wind so much, the crabbing angle isn't quite so severe. So let's go back to heading mode and then tune for LAM at 115.60. So we get the heading back to the direction we're going. Now the plane's stabilised just on that track. We switch back to heading mode, and that frees us up to go and modify the nav radio. So we want 115.60. So 115 on the integers, 60 on the decimals, and then make it the active frequency. And we are travelling to it. We know we're on the right track already based on the OBS setting we already had. So now we can switch back to nav radio. Just for illustration's sake, if we wanted to come in on a different radial, we could say we just draw this radial to see what it says. 143 degrees. Let's see what happens if we say we don't want to come in on the 123, we want the 14 degree radial. So look what's happened to the needle. It said, well, the line in the sky is to the left of you now. So the plane is turning left to go to the line. Yeah, so if you imagine this vertical needle is kind of the line in the sky relative to us travelling this way. So the plane was going to fly across and then follow 143 degrees into the VOR station. Or that's the plan anyway. Let's see how successfully it does it. Once you get comfortable at operating the nav radios and the autopilot, I think one of the most fun things to do is intentionally give yourself poor visibility in the sim and then go and trust the instruments and do a flight without being able to see anything. It's probably one of the most, I think it's one of the fun things to do anyway. So we're still going incredibly fast, but they've only got the throttle on about 80%. Okay, so you can see the nav instrument is coming in, so we're getting close to the 143 degree track and the plane is starting to turn towards it, so which you can see happening there. Look, it's a shame that although it kind of does work over here, you can see distance measuring equipment working here. Look, it's distance to the beacon that you've got tuned in. It only seems to do it on nav 1, not on nav 2. So down to 3 miles, and it's not exact. I'm not sure if that's doing it via the VOR or the GPS, to be honest. It's a shame it hasn't got the decimals of the miles. But again, you could use that if you were working without GPS to mark the miles out, so you can look at the scale on your map if you had a paper map and use dividers and walk out the miles along the line. So you don't even have to triangulate. Just with one beacon you can figure out where you are by looking at the distance measuring. Okay, so we want to leave LAM on 103 degrees to travel towards our destination. So when this goes to from, we'll notice that based on what we saw last time, this will switch to roll mode, which means it's basically just keeping the wings level as soon as this disables. Because otherwise, if you imagine, it would start corkscrewing around the VOR beacon. Let's see what happens. So we're almost on top of the beacon. The needle will start to fall to one side, and this should go to roll mode based on what we saw last time. There it goes, it's gone to roll mode because we've passed over the top of the VOR. So it's just keeping the wings level. So that gives us time, without using heading mode, to go to say 103 degrees then from LAM. So we can switch this around then to 103. Just about there. No, it's 113, sorry. 103. And then we can go back to nav mode. And the plane will turn left, because it will have overshot while we were busy doing that. And it will come back round. Now we have got ILS at Southend, so we can have a play with that as well to see how that differs in terms of the way the radio works. So looking at the wind, we need to overfly at Southend, come back round, or we could deviate from here and follow a different radial. So rather than the direct track across the ground, let's measure distance on Little Nav Map and say it would be really useful if we could actually fly about 95 degrees, 94 degrees, something like that, across the ground. So let's go and change the Omni bearing selector on Nav 1. So instead of this 103, sorry, we're going to go for 95. So let's go. Notice it's not just going to turn to 95 degrees, because we're not talking about, see, it's gone way beyond 90 on its turn, because we're not talking about flying 95 degrees from where we were. We're talking about flying 95 degrees from the VOR station. So it's jumping over there to follow the line. And now it will begin turning right again, which you can see it's happening now. It's gently turning right, slightly to the left of the line on the map, or not to the line of the map, it's slightly to the right of the 95 or 93 degrees. Yeah, I haven't got quite that tuned in, have I? We're slightly to the left of the 95 degree radial from the VOR station, which is exactly what we can see on the map. So you have to remember, when you are talking about the radial you have chosen in respect to the nav radio, you have to think in terms of where the beacon is, not where you are. So this is showing your position relative to that radial from the beacon. So if we have a look at Southend, we'll wait until a bit closer. The major difference you will see when we tune into a localizer, which is what these frequencies are. These are not VORs, they're localizer frequencies. It behaves in a different way than VOR. I'm just going to shut the door. Yeah, localizers behave in a different way than a VOR, in that you don't get to change the OBS or the Omni bearing selector radial that you're tuned or that you're navigating from or to the station. It will be locked to the runway direction. Okay, so we know we are 7 miles out from the beacon we are leaving behind, because we're travelling the 95 degree radial from the beacon. So we're 7 miles, it will change to 8 in a moment. So you can see the radial is indicated there. So that will obviously change according to what we choose here. It even knows the name of it, look, so LAM. So that's a double check that you've got the right frequency. It's got a database of them. So that was the LAM beacon. Okay, so we're following the 95 degree track. Hopefully on the ground we're not going to have a 25 knot wind, so we can actually find that out. Actually, we can find out, look, we got ATIS 136055. Let's go turn it on. Or ATIS, as some people call it. So if we go and push this over while we're flying along, 126, what was it? 136055. So change the integers to 136. Change the decimals to 055, go the other way. And then change it to active.
Wind 129er at 25.
25 knots. That's right on the limit of what the Cessna can deal with.
2,100 feet. Temperature 7. 2.10. Altimeter tree 0.27. ILS runway 05 in use. Landing and departing runway 05. DSR aircraft.
So they want us to come in runway 05. So we are going to change our mind.
On initial contact, you have Charlie.
So that will repeat round. Yeah, it's just going to play it again and again and again. So what we can do is just detune it. I'll put a different frequency on and then it won't play it over and over at us. Okay, so they want us actually to come in runway 05, so we'll do that. We'll go from where we are. We want to go... Yeah, we'll do it on the frequency for the ILS. So 111.35, you'll see this happen now, which will be quite useful. So we can use the heading mode. So we go back to heading mode and say we want to go this way, measure distance. So we're kind of going to fly 145 degrees then. So we spin this round to 145, 130, 140, 145 degrees. So the plane's just following the heading now. So it is going to skid sideways in the wind, but not too much because we're heading almost straight into the wind. So while we're doing that, we're going to tune the nav radio in to see how this behaves on ILS, 111.35. So we come over here, we press the button to get back onto tuning the nav radios. We want 111.35. Just double check that, 11135. And we make that the active frequency. And it's already switched on because we're near enough for it to pick this frequency up. Notice it's already saying it's localizer. ILS for runway 5. Yeah, it's really, really good. And notice now the OBS doesn't do anything. So we're just going to fly in, we're going to come back down to 1,000 feet. So we've got our altitude here, going to go for 1,000 feet, we're going to do it at 500 feet a minute. We need to come off the speed, we're going very fast, or off the throttle I should say. So cut the throttle to 50%. We'll have a play with approach mode as well, it's quite good fun. So the Cessna 172 does have approach mode. You still have to cut the autopilot off at 200 feet above ground level though. So that's going to be worth checking on the way in, just while we're flying towards the beam. Let's go and show information for Southend. Elevation is 46 feet above ground level and the QNH is 1025. So we need to change the QNH here to 1025. Which we've just done. So now the altimeter is accurate to ground level at our destination. So we know the ground then at Southend is 46 feet above ground level. So at 250 feet basically we have to come off the ILS. Oh, off the autopilot, sorry. So we're flying on heading mode at the moment. And you can see the line here for our position relative to the glide slope. So imagine there's an invisible line through the sky leading down to the runway apron. It's already saying our position, we are below that invisible line at the moment. But when we get to 1,000 feet, we're going to stop descending, and that will slowly come down towards us as we get closer to the airfield. And it's also saying we are to the left of the runway direction. So yeah, there's the runway, we are to the left of it, yeah? So we are going to get ready to turn left. So let's see what happens if we press approach mode from where we are. We are able to go into approach mode because we are below the beam, by the way. Approach mode in most aircraft, I've not tested it in the 172, approach mode won't work if you try to intercept the glide slope from above it. We are below the glide slope at the moment. So where is the runway? Can we see it yet? Is that it over there? So we are going to start putting the flaps out, so we need to get the speed down first. So reduce the throttle. Just watching the airspeed bleed off. Okay, we've got 2 stages of flaps, and you can see approach mode has kicked in. The plane is now descending following the glide slope. But if we look on the map, we're still not in line with the runway. Vertically we're in the right place because this line has aligned. If this line was below us, we would be above where we should be. If it was above us, we're below where we should be. But it's exactly on the line because obviously it's a machine doing it. So watch this. The aeroplane it knows we're to the left, and it's slowly coming in, so it's turning us gently left to match, or to get that needle into the middle. So it's looking at the rate of change of that needle and turning left to match it, gently. So remember, at 250 feet, we have to come off autopilot. So I'm getting ready on the controls. I still haven't touched the controls. It's slightly off to the moment, but it's trying to correct. Remember, it's fighting the wind. We've got a very strong crosswind. Okay, we're coming down to our altitude where we have to come off the autopilot. I'm coming off the autopilot now, so I'm in control. We were going a little bit fast there, but it's fine. It's one of the perils of explaining something while also doing it. You tend to drop the ball in one way or another. Look at the wind! Oh my word! So that was dangerous. So we're going to get the flaps up because they're obviously not helping. So that was probably beyond the limits of the Cessna, what we should have done, but short of turning the weather off and ruining the flight, it actually, you know, was quite useful. So I had to use the ailerons there to keep the wings level on landing. The wind got under the wings and started to tip the airplane over. So we're going to park up. So that's it. We flew from Booker Airfield over to Southend following VOR radios in the Cessna 172. And it was pretty much, it wasn't very dramatic at all, was it? But it was quite useful just to see that you can use heading mode on the autopilot, you can use nav mode on the autopilot, and then once you get onto ILS you can use approach mode, but you do have to cut off at 200 feet above ground level because it doesn't have auto land. We sit up in the seat so we can see where we're going. Are there any crew down here waiting for us? Doesn't look like it, does it? There's a guy wandering around in the distance. Where should we park? I guess we can go over where he's standing. Run these guys over. Okay, so parking brake on, and shutting the Cessna down is quite easy really. All you need to do is we got the we put the parking brake on, we lean the mixture out, which obviously uses up any fuel left in the engine. He's going to walk right through the aeroplane. Great, well done. Turn the avionics off, turn the master power off, turn the magnetos off, and we're done. So there you go. Hopefully, oh, now he's chopping his own head off on the wing. Great, well done. And now he's going to walk through the fuselage. Wonderful. Okay. Anyway, hopefully that was a useful example of flying VOR beacons in the Cessna 172, and I'll see you again soon.